Welcome to the Heartland Journals podcast with your host, Steve Abramowitz, editor-in-chief of heartlandjournal.com.
Howdy, y'all. Welcome back to the show. I'm Steve Abramowitz, and this is the Heartland Journal podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and pass it around. We only grow with your help, and thanks for doing it. On this show, we are focusing on our nation today with always an interesting person making a positive change in our community, where I interview people who are making an impact and are lovers of truth. Today, we are talking with a very special guest, Jennifer O'Neill. Internationally acclaimed model, actress, film and television star, spokesperson, producer, author, fundraiser, proud mother of three, and noted among the most beautiful women in the world by any definition, Jennifer O'Neill is one of a kind. Born in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, to an English mother and a Spanish-Irish father, Ms. O'Neill's career first began when her family moved from Connecticut to New York City, where she entered into international modeling at age 15 while still a student at the prestigious Dalton School in Manhattan. Jennifer's unprecedented 30-year spokeswoman campaign for CoverGirl catapulted CoverGirl into the top-selling makeup line in the country. And you may have seen her most recently on the big screen in last year's smash hit Reagan, playing Nell Clyde Wilson Reagan, Ronald Reagan's mother. Ms. O'Neill, how are you today?
I'm great, Steve. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited to have you on here. Let's start out talking about your extensive fundraising on behalf of pro-life efforts. Did you ever think you'd see a day like June 24th, 2022, almost 3 years ago now, thousands of babies' lives saved, that we'd actually overturn Roe versus Wade on the books since January 22nd, 1973?
Yeah, well, it's a step in the right direction for sure. And it's amazing how God turns all things for good, Romans 8:28. And I unfortunately had an abortion in my early 20s when it was legal. And I was told all the lies that were told, even from my doctor, that I was carrying just a blob of tissue, a cluster of cells. And I knew I didn't know any better. I had my fiance did not want this baby, radically did not want it. And I thought, well, my parents even said, you can have another one with him later. Of course, we didn't get married, and it destroyed my life. And abortion not only hurts the baby, of course, but it hurts families and relationships and women. So how they slid in the idea that women's rights included the right to kill your own child has become really very ridiculous to me. So I went on a campaign once I dealt with my grief and my guilt and my shame and all the bad things that happen to most women who have had an abortion. The after effects are hideous. And so I started raising funds for pro-life and for centers that support pro-life. And with the advent of the ultrasound machine, where you could see the humanity of your baby in the womb, I would say 95% at this point change their mind and choose life. But it's still hideous. And although we overturn Roe versus Wade, it becomes a state issue. So it goes from state to state. We still have a lot of work to do. And it's still a horrific, horrible stain on this country and in the world.
You're right. And you're in my state. Tennessee is one of the strictest against it now. And my old state of Washington State is actually a sanctuary for it. So they will taxpayer fund it every chance they get, all the way up to birth. It's really crazy how the states themselves have behaved. What did you do? Like, do you remember your mindset change from, say, the teenager you were before that event, and then the adult woman experience now that you were after the event, to talk to people and explain, like, no, what you think and are being told is wrong. You're going to regret it.
Yes. It's interesting. I wrote an autobiography and updated it by the publisher asking me to. I appropriately titled Surviving Myself. So I didn't come to my faith in Christ till I was 38 years old, working since I was 15. So I was out there kind of flinging around without having any any stability spiritually and knowledge that way, and wisdom. So I never thought of abortion. I always wanted to have children. I have three. I was blessed with three. I had 9 miscarriages along the way of having them because of the abortion that I had. But it was a very tumultuous time. And I believed my doctor, and I did not want to have the abortion. Many, many, many women that have abortions don't want to have the abortion. And many, many men don't want the woman to have an abortion. But as far as my mindset as a girl, in my book, the reason I mentioned the book is I call my younger years Jenny. I call myself Jenny because that's what I always wanted to be called. And then my middle years, when I was doing all those movies and everything else, I was Jennifer, which is my name. But when my parents were mad at me, they would say Jennifer. And so I wanted to be Jenny. And in these later years, I'm about to be 77 next week.
I was going to wish you happy birthday at the end, but I'll wish you happy birthday now.
Too. I like to be called Jen. And so, because my friends call me Jen. And so I see myself as 3 acts, if you will. And of course, my mind has changed about many, many issues during those three different people I feel like I've been.
Wow. So the 3 phases of your life, 3 different names. That's fantastic. I love that. That's so cute. 2 years before, let's go back to phase 1. 2 years before Roe, your amazing movie, Summer of 42, came out. It was 1971. You played Dorothy, which was like every teenage boy's fantasy. For those that don't know, Rent It. But a young man befriends the older woman, Dorothy, and finds himself in love with her. How do you think that movie affected the culture in a pro-Roe world, not knowing that it was just coming down the pike?
In a pro-Roe
Well,
world?
Roe was approved 2 years later.
That's
How
right.
do you
That's
think
right.
your movie when abortion was illegal kind of affected culture
I
that
don't
led
think it,
to?
I don't know that the movie affected that issue at all. I've never had anybody, sort of connect those dots. And it's interesting. Let me think about it, because when I think about that movie, Robert Mulligan was the director, and he directed To Kill a Mockingbird and beautiful films like that. So it was a love story, but the theme of it is I wonder if I would do it today, because it was about a woman. It was hard for me as an actress to find Dorothy's character and make her empathetic, because in fact she was having an affair one night stand, if you will, with this young man, and I really had to find the collision of emotions between this young man and this woman who lost her husband. So that evening, she got he went off to war, and that evening she got the telegram that he had died. She had drinks. That'll tell you what happens then. And the boy shows up, who has helped her with boxes and things. The thing about the movie, the beauty about the movie, was that it wasn't lascivious at all. It was about 2 people meeting at a particular moment and had a very kind of bittersweet exchange. So at the same time, I'm trying to think of the movie that was out. I can't remember it, but that was a little more raunchy. And it was at a time when nude scenes were starting to happen in movies. I've never done one, and I didn't do one in that movie. I said, I won't do it, and they worked around it. And I think that's why, in a way, that it's still very kind of romantic. As far as the mood of the society at that time, they were moving into nude scenes. They were moving into more risque thinking, although I don't consider Summer of 42 that kind of movie. So I think that they were double backing on the notion of women's rights. And again, they don't ring together to me at all. That women wanted to be heard, wanted to make the same salaries, wanted to have independence, wanted to have a sexual life if they wanted to. And so our basic biblical foundation was starting to erode. It didn't happen overnight, but look where we are now. And it was really beginning to turn on at that time.
Mm. Critics generally say about Summer 42 that it was, nostalgic charm, poignant portrayal of adolescent coming of age, and the sensitive handling of a young boy's first romantic encounter.
Yes.
Roger Ebert, the film critic on January 1st, 1971, I was born the very next month, but I've seen the movie, but wrote about it. Robert Mulligan is very good at trying to convince us that adolescence was somehow more innocent then. Do you find it interesting? Part of the innocence was, like I said, pre-Summer of Love, and went all the way back to 40s,
Yes.
and not yet. Like I was trying to make an allusion to this Roe world that I lived in my whole life until 2 years ago.
I
Um,
got you. I see what you say. I see what you're saying. And I think the nostalgia that that movie embraced was what Roger Ebert was talking about. And what you're trying to get at is that you grew up um, with an already skewed, about to be skewed view of morals and ethics and truth and what this country was based on, which is the Word of God. And at that time, I didn't know that either. I always believed in God, but I didn't know who Jesus was. I hadn't read the Bible, but I always knew there was something bigger than me. And I searched for it. So I studied Eastern philosophy for 10 years
hmm.
prior to coming to my faith. And I'm very glad I did, because it gives me a good understanding when I have the opportunity to witness to somebody who perhaps believes in that direction. And it's a very lively conversation because I understand what they're thinking. But without a change at all, I don't know what kind of faith, if you have any or not, but if we start predicating important things like abortion and social standards and free sex, that all of that was about to explode. I think it's easy to say, look where we are now. Gender confusion, the morals of this country, the division, the hatred. It's inevitable if you take the Word of God out of the center of what this country was built on. Everyone is welcome. Everyone can believe what they like, but it's still predicated on the Word of God, America. And we did better when we were listening.
Exactly right. Tell us how you got involved with the Silent No More awareness campaign.
Well, I had written my book, and so I came out, if you will, about the abortion. That was one of the most painful things for me to review. I knew when I wrote Surviving Myself, I knew it had to be an honest book and not a finger pointing book. You throw dirt, you lose ground. I wasn't blaming anybody for anything, but I've had a very tumultuous, crazy life. I've almost died 4 times. I've been married more times than Elizabeth Taylor. In fact, I sent her my book when I wrote it because I wanted her to hear about Jesus Christ. That's why I wrote the book. And she called me back and she said, Jen, my gosh, we have a lot in common. We didn't date men. We married everybody, and we're both hard to kill, because she was always having accidents too. So it was a funny line. And I use it a lot when I talk about pro-life, because I hope she got the message and the pain and the learning curve of a kind of life that I've had.
I like to think she did get the message and she passed it on to Michael
Yeah,
Jackson, but who knows, right?
that's right. I hope I see her later, but who knows? Our only job is to give the news.
That's right. That's what I have to always say. But I do have an opinion. Hope, that's why I have a show, not just a newsletter.
Yeah.
Hope and Healing is an equine therapy foundation in Nashville, Tennessee. Yay. How did you come to found that, and why did you choose to do it in Tennessee?
Well, let's see. I think I came out of my mother's womb loving horses, and they never understood that. They were more city folk. Mom was from London, and but I used to ride other people's horses from the time I can remember, and that's why I started working at 15 to buy my own horse. and show horses. So I did the A circuit and I showed horses and I did all of that. And I got married at 17 because the horse didn't fill all my buckets. And with my grand wisdom at 17, I got married. I forgot your question. I don't know where we're going here.
Really just the evolution of hope and healing, how you got to that place.
Yes,
And
yes.
why Tennessee of all places?
Horses,
From
but
Rio de Janeiro to Tennessee. You could have done it anywhere. You
yes,
chose Tennessee.
yes.
Why?
Thank you. So the horses have always been a part of my life, and showing them through the years, 60 years now. I came to Tennessee after I came to my faith in Christ because it wasn't very user-friendly to be a believer in Jesus in Hollywood. So I was kind of blackballed. I was very verbal about my faith. I was on fire when I finally found him. And
Like Bo
so,
Derek for being a Republican, you for being a believer.
yeah, I really had a problem. So I moved to Nashville, which I heard was user friendly. The Bible Belt, here we are. And I bought this farm that we're in now, just 15 minutes outside of Nashville, about in 2010, 2009. And I was over 60 at that time. So I wasn't going to show my horses anymore. And because I wasn't bouncing very well on the ground as easily. And I thought, God, what am I going to do with the passion I have for this country and the military? My dad was a war hero in World War II, bigger than life. I read about him in books in school. And I grew up with Victory at Sea playing. So I had that passion
What was his name?
Oscar Delgado O'Neill Jr. Who would do that to someone? But he was a captain of a B-17 at 23 years old, shot down on his second to last mission. It was in German prison camp that they made the Great Escape about for 2.5 years. And when he came out a major, I went back and got my mom, whom he had met at a key club in London when she was 18, asked her to marry him the next day, and then he got shot down. So they went back. He went back to get her and took her to Brazil, where I was born. Very, very Hollywood, doesn't it sound like?
Oh my gosh, I want to see the movie right now. And so you
Yeah,
were born in Rio de Janeiro, amongst all of
yeah.
that. How'd you get to Connecticut, and what was life like for you coming to America so young and then getting into modeling, which is
So
obviously
I came when I was a year old. So
1 year
really,
old. Ah, okay.
yeah, I don't speak Portuguese.
Gotcha.
My dad spoke 5 languages, and just interesting people, but not soccer ball people. So they were fascinating. They lived with me for 35 years at the end of their lives, and I'm grateful for so many things that they showed me. But I didn't have that kind of basic security soccer ball mom and dad. And so I was an overachiever and they moved back into the city and sent my dog to the pound. And I was, no one's going to do that to me again. And that's when I started working. So fast forward, working to get a horse. So fast forward through the marriages and the this and that. By the way, I am now married 29 years to my husband.
I was going to end with that. You're looking ahead in the notes. Good.
There's hope at the end of the tunnel. There is light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not a train, it's God. So all things are possible, and it's never too late. I can't believe I got 29 years in there at my craggy age. But it was the decision to do the Hope and Healing at Hill and Glade and the equine therapy because of my love of horses, what they had done for me. They were my saving grace all my life. And I'm good with them because I know them well. And so we don't do riding. It's all on ground relational therapy that has had the most amazing results. We work with Fort Campbell. We have a program here called the Harvest Program that we get sponsors for, bring in either a policeman or a military or first responder who needs to clear away some cobwebs of PTSD and learn horses. And they stay for 2 months on the farm. And then they can either go on as a career in equine therapy or anything else that they like to do. But we have 2 women coming in. We've just finished graduating 2 guys, policemen in Army. And these 2 women are a major from the Army and someone from the Navy. So it's going to be very interesting.
That is so amazing. I
So,
love horses. They are just made for cinema. To see horses on the big screen is just, I think that's why movies were invented. How
God was
did,
in a good mood when he made a horse, and Jesus comes back on a horse. And I think we've served over 4,000 people since we started in 2010 with the horses.
what a blessing. What an amazing thing. So you mentioned briefly your dad and growing up in that situation and taking your dog to the pound, obviously not as sensitive as you are. How did Howard Hawks and John Wayne find you so quickly to be in Rio Lobo, the movie? You were a leading actress, married, and mother of your first child by the age of 21. So, just to put that
So
capping on your of your phase one, how did Howard Hawks and John Wayne affect you?
this is such a funny story. First of all, I never liked modeling. I loved the CoverGirl people. That's why I was with them for so long. They were a great group of people and a great product. But I didn't care for modeling. It just was a means to an end to buy a horse. So I wanted to act. I wanted to be a mom. So I became a mom when I was just 19. And I wanted to go to acting school. So in anything in life, if you act like I'm not, I had some attention from being a model. So they started to pursue me. And when I would say no, that made me more interesting to them, I suppose. I just wanted to study, which I did at the neighborhood playhouse for 2 years before I went into acting. I wanted to be good. And so Howard Hawks saw me somewhere, and my agent called all excited and said, they want you, come out and meet Howard Hawks. You know who he is? Yes, yes. To co-star with John Wayne. It was my first movie.
Unbelievable.
And John Wayne. I want to work with Al Pacino. I want to work with an actor.
He was too lowbrow for you. He was a B movie actor in your mind.
Something happened here. It just went Zoom workplace.
I see
Sign on.
you. I see you.
Okay, but I don't see you.
Oh,
You're gone. So
don't
we can
tell me that.
pretend.
Yeah, go ahead. I think I see myself, so I think it's working, but go ahead.
Well, I see Zoom workplace. That's all. I have a blank screen. So where was I? So
John
Al
Wayne.
Pacino. And so I went in, and my agent went nuts, and he said, "Are you crazy?" But the funny thing is that working with John Wayne was better than a bag of chips. He was the kindest, always on time. And talk about acting. It was the year that he won the Academy Award for True Grit. So shame on me. I loved the man, and I've always remembered what a snob I was and how silly I was to think of him that way. And it was such an honor to work with him. And he was good friends with Reagan.
Yes.
And you didn't do 2 things you didn't do with John Wayne, the Duke. You didn't play cards with him, and you didn't speak politics. Or you better agree with him. That's all.
Did you not play cards with him because he was good at it or because he cheated?
But no, he was so good, but he didn't lose well.
He didn't lose well. Oh, I see you get mad. So I first got to know you on TV, of course. I thought Cover Up was the coolest show. Photographer hires military vet John Eric Hexum for undercover spy work. I mean, when I was a kid, that was like, oh my gosh. Because I kind of liked Hollywood, but this was sort of like behind the camera doing like
Right.
real politique. I was sad when he died by accidental self-inflicted blank cartridge gunshot to the head in 1984. I was, I guess,
Horrible.
14. Yeah, that must have been horrible. How did you cope with that?
Well, again, I don't know if he had faith. I know I didn't have faith, so it wasn't a conversation. So I didn't even have the knowledge that I would see him later in eternity. It was just very blunt and very real. I was in my trailer, and he was messing around, overtired, and I had been shot with a 38. So I was pretty strict with him about the guns. He was always fooling around, and I wouldn't let him fool around when I was there, but I guess I wasn't there, and so he was fooling around and shot himself inadvertently. This beautiful man, young man who was at the prime of his career, was booming, and nicest guy. And so I went to see him, of course, in the hospital. He had donated his organs, so he was on a ventilator. And it's the first time that I really could see the difference between just a body and when the spirit's gone. I could see that. I didn't know much about it, but I could see the difference. He wasn't there. His body was there. It was breathing, but he wasn't there. Very sad.
Yeah, I'm so glad I asked you about that because that's really amazing the way you said it, the way you put it. So you were married at 17, have three children, married 9 times, like you said. You've said many,
One twice.
oh,
This is a,
so eight,
and it's also
eight,
why
eight men, 9 marriages, nine I
yeah,
do's.
eight
Okay.
men, nine there. And this is also why I do the work I do with the Hope and Healing at Hill Glade. My ex-husband is 100% disabled, PTSD, a Marine from Vietnam. And so I lived with and tried to make that meatball bounce and married him twice. We have a son, a wonderful man, but just devastated by his PTSD. So that's why I work so hard to help people in trauma. I think life is everyone in this life these days has PTSD in one way or another. I certainly do. And so to understand it and have a way to manage it and not get triggered in life and rearrange your thought patterns. And of course, my faith is at the key of that. But the horses are brilliant. And it really helps people that have tried everything, been put on drugs, been had talk therapy. It's amazing. It works. So if you're struggling, find someplace near you where you can do equine therapy or come here.
I do want to go there. Not just for that. I'm doing pretty good, but I love horses and I think you're amazing. How about your
Come visit.
family?
You got
Kids
an
and now
invitation.
grandkids. Thank you. I will take you up on that. Now grandkids. So do they know grandma is a believer and are they going down the same path as you?
I yeah, they sure know. So did my parents for 35 years. But again, I think it's important to let people know that our job as a believer is just to tell the truth, um, and tell about the saving grace of Jesus Christ. And it's the Holy Spirit's job to close the deal. So don't feel tempted not to say something if you fail or don't fail. That's not up to you. The Great Commission is all about just our job is to be his hands and feet and his mouth on this earth to talk about the good news of Jesus. My kids, I've got one, my youngest, um, he's a very strong believer. He went to Hillsong in Australia to study ministry, and he's in the arts and makes films and all of that. He's a strong believer. My other son says he has his faith, and my daughter is not. And my three grandsons, one of whom died through an accident at 23. So we lost him, and he also donated his organs. So he saved 7 people. In the process, they had to keep him going for a week. Very painful for my daughter. And I believe that during that time, Jesus had a little, as my mother would say, chin wag with my grandson. And I hope to see him. I don't think he was a believer prior to dying, but you can make that decision. God doesn't want to lose any of us. But I feel very guilty in a way about that. My daughter and her children aren't believers because they weren't exposed to it. I wasn't exposed to it. My mom used to say that we were Episcopalians because she was English. And I christened my kids and I got married in a church. but I didn't have a clue what I was doing. It was just, we did that by rote, and it's a shame. So I didn't know what it was supposed to represent, really, other than some covering. I said I always believed in God. My mom believed in God, but she didn't know who Jesus was. So my kids weren't exposed, but my younger kids, I have 20 years between my first and last child. So the last two, the boys, were, I have to tell you, can I tell you a quick story?
Of course.
I can't see you, so if you're nodding, I'm going to go ahead.
Yes, please tell us.
When I would take the boys to school, and we would put our armor on. That's in Ephesians 6, which God tells us to protect ourselves. And we would have it, I would say, let's put on our belt of truth, the breastplate of righteousness, the helmet of salvation, the shield of faith, the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, and our feet planted firmly in the gospel of peace, ready to go in Jesus' name. And the boys would get out, and then I'd say, why do you think all the armor's in the front? And they'd squeal, because God's got our backs.
There you go. It's working.
Remember your armor.
Yeah. That's in Leviticus too. In the 70s and 80s, Reagan wasn't the beloved California governor or president we think of him as now. Do you remember how Hollywood treated him, even though he was, one of their own, but a Republican president, so he was the enemy?
He was treated pretty poorly, and yet, and he started out as a Democrat.
Union boss too.
Pardon?
The union boss for Hollywood.
Boss, and he took that job because he was not the most popular leading man. He didn't get the best roles, but he did a great job with that. And I think that the Duke, John Wayne, had a lot to do with talking him into becoming governor of California, and he found his niche. I mean, he was such a remarkable man. I went to the White House. There's another funny story, if I may say, but my mom was a stickler about manners, what fork to use, being English, I suppose. And she said, I don't know, I can't make you do it this way, but I'm going to know that you've been taught properly, because someday you're going to need it. So I found myself at the White House at a dinner with the Reagans. And afterwards, I called my mom and I said, thank you. I knew which fork out of the 17 and knife to use that was at this dinner table. I was so grateful because I didn't feel like a fish out of water. And it's a funny connection that I had. I was honored to play Nellie, Reagan's mother, because I think she was such an amazing woman and had an enormous influence on Reagan, and his ability to make the impact that he did on this country. And he always gave the glory to God. And she instilled that. And it was what I would have wanted to do with my older daughter. So I'm sorry for that. She's heard about it. So I pray. Her name is Amy. Anybody wants to pray for her. And
I mean, the movie was great about depicting Reagan's faith and upbringing through you, the mother, Nellie, because we didn't know that either. The perception that we had was, and I grew up in California, so he was governor while I was there, and then on to president, but I didn't know. It's very young. So what did you learn about Nellie and Reagan himself's belief, which led to basically the winning of the Cold War, saving millions and millions of lives from nuclear Armageddon?
Like that. She was a great believer. She taught Bible study, and she also liked theater. So I think she put that in Reagan a little bit. But she was a very, very deep believer. Her husband, although they stayed married, she basically raised both her boys because her husband was charming and yet he was a drunk. That's the fact. I don't like to call people names, but it just goes to show you what a strong woman she was, and how her ethics and morals were placed on her sons. So she was, I have one, if you blink, you miss me in the movie. I have one scene with Dennis Quaid, who was phenomenal in the film. But it's at a time when Reagan went through divorce and was losing his children. And then he had that lifelong, incredible affair, love affair, not affair, marriage with Nancy. Reminds me of my parents. But she told her son at that point, at his lowest ebb, she merely said, just listen to that small, quiet voice. And she was talking about the Holy Spirit, and you'll be fine and you'll be healed. And she directed him even more strongly than ever to rely on God and on his faith in God.
Thankfully he did. So you were in movies with John Wayne, James Coburn, Donald Sutherland, Robert Duvall, Elliot Gould, Chuck Norris, and James Brolin. Anyone stand out as your favorite co-stars?
And Anthony Quinn, who was my
Oh,
not favorite. I did 5 months in Iran doing James Michener's Caravans. That was one of the craziest locations I've ever been with. There are actors who are generous, giving, and others that try and steal the scene, either by changing. It's an art, actually, changing their readings on the close-up. It's really pretty tricky, and so Colburn was a very giving actor. I'm trying to think. Donald Sutherland wasn't, and Anthony Quinn really wasn't very helpful. So just note, if you're thinking about being actors, be gracious when you're on the other side. Give as much to that your partner that you're doing a scene with when you're behind the camera they're doing their close-up, because that's the way it should go.
yeah, I think you're right. When you, as an audience member, you can kind of sense when somebody's stealing the
Yeah.
spotlight, as they say.
Yeah.
So we talked about it briefly, but you've been married for I think 27 years now, maybe 28. My notes could be old. To Mervyn Loke, how do you say it? Loki? Luke, who operated a popular Nashville music venue.
Louque, and it's French, so it's Luke.
Louque. And he operated a very popular Nashville music venue for songwriters and singers. It was called the Douglas Corner Cafe for 33 years. Garth Brooks, Alan Jackson, Trisha Yearwood, Blake Shelton are among thousands who performed there, along with the Bluebird Cafe, one of Nashville's premier showcases for country songwriters and rising artists. Why did he close that, and what's he doing now?
It's here. It's on the farm. I'm sorry, my phone is ringing. It's here. He was on the road with a big trailer, doing sound for the Stones, and he's one of the best engineers in Nashville. Everybody loves him, and he opened that club because he didn't want to travel anymore, and he put the trailer behind the club so he could do the videos and all of that. And when COVID happened, he closed, and he put this thing, the trailer was on blocks, and he put tires on it, and some lunatic drove it down 65. And we got it on the farm, took a few fences down, and he built then out the club, and it's here, 15 minutes from downtown Nashville. So it's for private parties and riding in the round and all of that. It's got all the memorabilia, and the sound is as good as Douglas Corner ever had.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I found
Now you
something
really
in
have
it.
to come out.
Yeah, tomorrow. We spent 3 years building our private suites, a clubhouse, bunkhouse, and indoor ring, and we have my husband's music club. We're going to have weddings, corporate venues, team building retreats, family reunions, and private parties. We are hoping to work. Will help our 501c3, HHH, and all the money will go to that, said O'Neill, who loves her horses as much as she loves our nation's military heroes. I forget what magazine I got that out of. Sorry, I can't quote it. So great. You're fully functioning entertainment and horse equine.
One-stop shop here. We do, because there's a lot of healing also that with music and art. So we offer music and art and horses. And so we're very busy, but we're also training others to expand our hoof print, if you will. I can't buy farms all over the country, but all over the country, people need help. So I have a curriculum that I've developed over the last 15 years specifically about equine therapy. Not that I think I'm a smarty pants, but there weren't any curriculums that I totally agreed with out there, especially groundwork curriculum. And so I wrote my own after 60 years with horses and 15 years of doing equine therapy, which, by the way, is more gratifying than ever showing. I bred horses for years, but the healing that goes on is just masterful.
Oh, I'm sure there's a huge sense of satisfaction when you see a horse come a long way. All right, I got a few minutes left with you if you have them too. I'm since I love the movie business, I have to ask this one. Summer of 42 was made for $1 million, made 30 million for Warner Brothers, and that's that day's money. It got an Oscar. They don't make them like that anymore. What do you think the future of the movie business is going to be like?
I think it's starting to change. I think people are pretty fed up with. I can't even turn on TV and feel relaxed about what's going to pop up. And I think that there's going to be a shift. I think people are interested in making good films. Oh, please! I've done about 5 or 6 Christian movies, and God bless them for wanting to do a lovely story, but they didn't have the talent. We should use the best talent from Hollywood and make the best movies about things that matter, that have value, that are inspirational and entertaining, but not to be afraid of going to the movies and seeing people naked or swearing or doing or I don't want to watch that. I want to be inspired. I want to read a good book, go to a good movie, help people heal. That's what it's about.
Especially when they try to slip it into something that you don't think is going to be that, a PG movie with a X-rated scene or a Netflix show that's completely off the rails, or even just the previews before going to see a Disney cartoon, you're going to get something and you'll be like, I don't want to have that image in my brain.
Once
So
it's there, you can't do anything about it. You don't want to dwell on it, but plunk, they surprise you. It's not fair.
a captive audience, right? It's a little bit of a bait and switch or false advertising. Yeah. And if you said, I'm going to go see a G-rated movie with my kids, you expect to have a G-rated evening, not all of a sudden there's a little bit of X-ratedness in your life.
Absolutely.
They don't want that. Got it. Singer Stevie Nicks said that her abortion helped her career by saving it at a time when Fleetwood Mac was very successful. Shortly after her illegal abortion, Sally Fields says in her book, her family doctor brought her to Tijuana, Mexico at 17 years old in order to perform the abortion. This was before the establishment of Roe v. Wade. She began auditioning and landed her breakthrough role of Gidget by the end of the year. These were your peers at the same time. Michelle Williams said at the 2020 Golden Globe Awards that having an abortion saved her career. What do you say to these women?
If killing a baby is even in the same sentence as a career, I'm sorry for you, because my biggest heroes are people who found themselves with an unexpected pregnancy or something that they don't think that they can handle, raising that child, and they have that child, and more people are waiting to adopt than babies are being aborted. Let's connect the dots. It's 9 months of your life, and it's someone else's entire life. And Reagan said this, and I love this. He said, it's very interesting to me. He's such a good wordsmith. Very interesting to me that everyone that seems to be pro-choice have already been born. And if I can tell you this, that 1/3 of our youth are pro-life now, because I think they've turned around and realized that that aborted child could have been them very well. 1/3 of their generation is missing because of abortion. And we will see our children again. There is healing after abortion for the mother and the father who allowed that heinous act. But I'm not judging people. I went through it. It's a horrible thing, and it's so guilt-ridden. But Jesus Christ died on the cross for all of our sins, including abortion. So if you've had an abortion, if you've suffered an abortion, there's healing for that. It's in the Bible, and it tells us that we will see our children later, and there's no, there will be reconciliation with that baby or babies that you aborted. So tell the truth now while we're in this world, because if God says he's got our children, he does. And look at the option of adoption. One last thing on abortion, because you keep bringing it up, and I think it's great. One would think that in some states, they state an exception to their laws if you've been raped or incest. And the interesting fact is that only 2% or less of women or girls that have been raped or has suffered what was the other one?
Incest. Mm-hmm.
Only 2% or less get an abortion because of that. They may place the baby for adoption. They may not raise that child, but the reason is in an interview that I saw, and I researched this, is that they did not want to have their baby inflicted with the violence that they experienced in the rape and in the incest. They did not want to put that on that child. So they decided to have the baby, give it life, and whether they raised it or not is a secondary question.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Switching gears for the last 2 minutes here. I love horses, but never really thought about why I love them. I love dogs too. What is it about horses that the veterans and first responders find so therapeutic with anxiety and depression?
I'll tell you in a nutshell how it works. First of all, they have a 6 times radius of heartbeat effect on anything than we do. So you're drawn to them by their size, by their power, by their gentleness, by the fact that they're incredibly insightful. And you have to be present when you're with a horse that you're looking up at like that. Most people who are suffering from trauma or PTSD or a myriad of issues, they get all in their head. They get all about their trauma, and they get stuck. They get triggered. And horses make you, by their nature and their size, be present in the moment. And we create a relationship with that horse. We don't drag the horses around. We don't break the horses. We want to partner with the horses, and we want these individuals to be loving, solid leaders to the horse. And in doing so, that's where they heal. That's where they show where they're insecure, whether they've lost their voice in their trauma, and so forth. And when you create a relationship of respect with an animal that weighs 10, 15 times your weight and has a mind of its own, and you all of a sudden have synergy with that animal, it's so rewarding and so healing. And you begin to realize, because they mirror how you present yourself. Unlike a dog, unless it's been beaten, will come up and wag its tail and love everybody. But a horse, because they're herd animals and they're flight animals because they were hunted. So you walk into a horse, the horse doesn't just say, hey, hi, how are you? They evaluate if you're a threat to them. And then they remember you. And then they create a very loving relationship with you. And they'll do pretty much anything for you. That takes time. But that time is where you work out your kinks, and you realize, wow, I have been presenting to my children like this horse will back up if you present with your anger. PTSD people often are angry and they don't even realize how they're presenting themselves, how they speak, the level of their voice. They're all about their pain, and rightfully so. And a horse will mirror that for them. So they begin to learn. Yikes. I had a guy that came here, another story. He volunteered. He was a Vietnam veteran and knew horses and volunteered for 6 months. Came in one day and he said, Jen, I have to tell you a story. I went home yesterday and my wife of 20 years was sitting at the kitchen table and with some papers in front of her. And she said, when I walked in, who are you? And he said, I'm your husband. And she said, I don't know who you are. I don't know what's happened to you. You actually come home and ask how I am. You care whether I had a good day or not. Before you were all about just this storm. It would be like a storm came in the room because you were so obsessed. And he said, it's the horses, because he came in with the horses here like that and they showed him. And she said, these papers are divorce papers. I was going to divorce you. And I'm tearing them up. I can't see, I can't imagine the difference. If you go to my website or my website, I'm so old, I don't know what anything's called. And look at the videos of the testimonies that happen here. It just makes you cry.
I hope everyone will get to what your website is at the end here. All That Glitters conferences. Tell us about those real quick.
Well, it's something that I want to do here. I did them for a while. I spoke. I've written 7 books, and I spoke. I love women, and I love the family, and I address those issues in most of my books, whether it's a novel or an autobiography. And then I've spoken with women of faith and in different women's conferences. And then I put on my own called All That Glitters. The rest of that sentence is all that glitters is not gold. And my life reminded me of that phrase, because it looks so good. What looks so good on the outside hurt so badly on the inside, until I came to my faith and started to heal. And so now I want to do, because we have a chapel as well at Hill and Glade, and I do Bible studies and so forth, but I'm going to do Glitter Girls, and because I love girls, and before they go off to college, so maybe 14 to 17-year-olds, we are going to have weekends to come and go through the important things of life, reestablish their faith, get their groundwork solid before they go off. Because even my granddaughter, and I hope she doesn't mind my saying this because she's back, but she was a believer and went off to college and all this woke stuff, and came back a non-believer. So you have to get solid in your faith and your knowledge, and be prepared to stand up for what you believe in when you go off as a 17-year-old or 18-year-old. So Glitter Girls we're going to be doing the equine therapy with them, letting them work out any issues that they may have about their value. I don't know how young ladies deal with anything these days, because everything seems to be predicated on what someone else said about them or what somebody else thinks about them, with all this social media. And it's so damaging to the heart of a young lady. And then her values get shuffled around. And I want to put them back in place and glue them there before they go off.
All right. So last question, thinking about your autobiography, Surviving Myself, if 10, 11, 12-year-old Jenny came up to you, Jen, today and said, what should I do? Cover girl, TV, movies, horses. What advice would you give yourself to make it all easier?
I don't think that any of my career moves hurt me. I always wanted to get straight A's in school so my parents would be proud of me, and I like to achieve things. But if I had known what I know now as a child. And most people, by the time they're 18, make their decision for faith or not. If I had known, I would have had the tools to navigate that kind of career and that kind of exposure internationally probably better than I did. So I wouldn't say don't do it, because I'm very proud of my career, but and you can affect people highly with what you do. It gives you a platform, and so that I think God gave me a platform by having an abortion that I had unwittingly, unwanted abortion, and I hated myself for it. But he still turned it around, God did, and gave me a platform. So when I say to somebody who's considering an abortion, hey, I've been there and I had one, don't do it. Don't do it for the baby. Don't do it for your sake. So being with Silent No More, because I had that platform, you asked earlier about Silent No More, it was a great organization and I was sort of the mouthpiece for it. I went on the show, what is the show with all the women
The
during
View.
the day? The
The
View. Yeah.
View.
Imagine I went on The View on my way to going to Washington to do the march. And wow, what an interview.
Yeah, everyone should go find that on YouTube and watch that. That's a good one.
It's crazy. It was, but the Holy Spirit was with me. So
I like your message a heck of a lot better than Sally Fields, and you both came up the ranks at the same time. So, Mrs. O'Neill, thank you for your time. You're a legend. I'm honored to spend some time with you. We are at the end here, so just tell everyone where they can go to find out more about you. Follow your social media if you do that, and of course your website so people can come check.
I don't have any help in the office right now, so I don't post very often, but we have Facebook, Hill and Glade, and Hill and Glade is HILLENGLADE and .org, and that's our website. All our information is on there, phone numbers, where we are and what we do. And again, as you mentioned so kindly before, we do private parties and things to help support the 501c3, because all those 4,000 people that we've helped so far in the last 15 years is free of charge, thanking them for their service and sacrifice on our behalf. And so it's an honor to do that and see what the rest of my life is about. Somebody said, when are you going to retire? I said, what does that mean? I don't know what that means. None of us retire.
Truly remarkable, and still find time to get your way into a movie. So that's fantastic. So thanks again for coming on with us. I'm going to take a quick break. I will be right back.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming back. It's that time to remind everyone to please subscribe to heartlandjournal.com. That's how we grow and keep this content free for you. And I really hope you like that. Now, the Heartland Journal news. Valentine's Day is a holiday celebrated every February 14th. This year, Valentine's Day falls on a Friday. Across the United States and in other places around the world, candy, flowers, and gifts are exchanged between loved ones, all in the name of Saint Valentine. I myself will be taking my lovely wife to the Cody Johnson concert in Nashville. Did it last year too. It's becoming a tradition. But who is this mysterious saint and where did these traditions come from? Find out about the meaning and history of Valentine's Day from the ancient Roman ritual of Lupercalia that welcomed spring to the card-giving customers of Victorian England. The history of Valentine's Day and the story of its patron saint is shrouded in mystery. We do know that February has long been celebrated as a month of romance, and that St. Valentine's Day, as we know it today, contains vestiges of both Christian and ancient Roman tradition. But who was St. Valentine, and how did he become associated with this ancient rite? The Catholic Church recognizes at least 3 different saints named Valentine or Valentinus, all of whom were martyred. One legend contends that Valentine was a priest who served during the 3rd century in Rome when Emperor Claudius II decided that single men made better soldiers than those with wives and families. He outlawed marriage for young men. Valentine, realizing the injustice of the decree, defied Claudius and continued to perform marriages for young lovers in secret. When Valentine's actions were discovered, Claudius ordered that he be put to death. Still, others insist that it was Saint Valentine of Terni, a bishop who was the true namesake of the holiday. He too was beheaded by Claudius II outside Rome. Not good for young lovers. Other stories suggested that Valentine may have been killed for attempting to help Christians escape harsh Roman prisons where they were often beaten and tortured. According to one legend, an imprisoned Valentine actually sent his first Valentine greeting himself after he fell in love with a young girl, possibly his jailer's daughter, who visited him during his confinement. Before his death, it is alleged that he wrote her a letter signed "From your Valentine," an expression that is still in use today. Although the truth behind the Valentine legend is murky, the stories all emphasize his appeal as a sympathetic, heroic, and most importantly, romantic figure. By the Middle Ages, perhaps thanks to his reputation, Valentine would become one of the most popular saints in England and France. While some believe that Valentine's Day is celebrated in the middle of February to commemorate the anniversary of Valentine's death or burial, which probably occurred around AD 270, others claim that the Christian church may have decided to place St. Valentine's feast day in the middle of February in an effort to Christianize the pagan celebration of Lupercalia. Celebrated at the Ides of February, or February 15th, Lupercalia was a fertility festival dedicated to Phanes, the Roman god of agriculture, as well as to the Roman founder Romulus and Remus. To begin the festival, members of the Lupercia, an order of Roman priests, would gather at a sacred cave where the infants Romulus and Remus, the founders of Rome, were believed to have been cared for by a she-wolf or lupa. The priest would sacrifice a goat for fertility and a dog for purification. They should then strip the goat's hide into strips, dip them into the sacrificial blood, and take to the streets, gently slapping both women and crop fields with the goat hide. Ouch. Far from being fearful, Roman women welcomed the touch of the hides because it was believed to make them more fertile in the coming year. Later in the day, according to legend, all the young women in the city would place their names in a big urn. The city's bachelors would each choose a name and become paired for the year with his chosen woman. These matches often ended in marriage. Who is Cupid, you ask? Cupid is often portrayed as Valentine's Day cards as a naked cherub launching arrows or love at unsuspecting lovers, but the Roman god Cupid has his roots in Greek mythology as the Greek god of love, Eros. Accounts of his birth vary. Some say he is the son of Nyx and Erebus, others of Aphrodite and Ares. Still others suggest he is the son of Iris and Zephyrus, or even Aphrodite and Zeus, who would have been both his father and grandfather. According to the Greek archaic poet, Eros was a handsome immortal played with the emotions of gods and Eros was a handsome immortal played with the emotions of gods and men, using golden arrows to incite love and leaden ones to sow aversion. It wasn't until the Hellenistic period that he began to be portrayed as the mischievous, chubby child he'd become on Valentine's Day cards. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre shocked the world on February 14, 1929, when Chicago's North Side erupted in gang violence. Gang warfare ruled the streets of Chicago during the late 1920s as chief gangster Al Capone sought to consolidate control by eliminating his rivals in the illegal trades of bootlegging, gambling, and prostitution. This rash of gang violence reached its bloody climax in a garage on the city's north side on February 14, 1929, when 7 men associated with the Irish gangster George Bugsy Moran, one of Capone's longtime enemies, were shot to death by several men dressed as policemen. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre, as it was known, remains an unsolved crime and was never officially linked to Capone, but he was generally considered to have been responsible for the murders. From 1924 to 1930, the city of Chicago gained a widespread reputation for lawlessness and violence. Not coincidentally, this phenomenon coincided with the reign of Chief Crime Lord Scarface Capone, who took over from his boss, Johnny Torrio, in 1925. Torrio, who was seriously wounded in an assassination attempt in 1924, had retired to Brooklyn. Prohibition, ushered in by the passage of the 18th Amendment in 1920, had greatly increased the earnings of America's gangsters through bootlegging, the illegal manufacture and sale of alcohol, and speakeasies, illicit drinking establishments, as well as gambling and prostitution. Capone's income from these activities was estimated at some $60 million a year. His net worth in 1927 was around $100 million. Did you know George Bugs Moran was on his way to the garage in Chicago at the time of the St. Valentine's Day massacre? He missed getting killed by minutes. A few days later, he told reporters only Capone kills like that. Reached at his Florida home for comment on the murders, Capone offered his own opinion. The only man who kills like that is Bugs Moran. Over the years, Al Capone consolidated control over most of Chicago's crime rackets by ruthlessly gunning down his rivals. In 1924, authorities counted some 16 gang-related murders. This brand of slaying continued until 1929, reaching a high of 64 murders in 1 year during that time. Federal authorities, including the Federal Bureau of Investigation, had much less jurisdiction than they have today and did not include Chicago's gang-related activity. Chicago's gang war reached its bloody climax in the so-called St. Valentine's Day Massacre. One of Capone's longtime enemies, the Irish gangster Bugs Moran, ran his bootlegging operation out of a garage at 2122 North Clark Street. On February 14th, 7 members of Moran's operation were gunned down while standing lined up facing the wall of the garage. Some 70 rounds of ammunition were fired. When police officers from Chicago's 36th district arrived, they found one gang member, Frank Gusenberg, barely alive. In the few minutes before he died, they pressed him to reveal what had happened, but he wouldn't talk. Police could find only a few eyewitnesses, but eventually concluded that gunmen dressed as police officers had entered the garage and pretended to be arresting the men, though Moran and others immediately blamed the massacre on Capone's gang. The famous gangster himself claimed to have been at his home in Florida at the time. No one ever brought to trial for the murders. It remains one of the biggest unsolved crimes in history. Though the St. Valentine's Day Massacre marked the end of any significant gang operations to Capone's rule in Chicago, it can also be said to have marked the beginning of his downfall. With his highly effective organization, his impressive income, and his willingness to ruthlessly eliminate his rivals, Capone had become the country's most notorious gangster, and the newspapers dubbed him public enemy number one. Federal authorities began investigating Capone after he failed to appear before a federal grand jury after being subpoenaed in March 1929. When he finally appeared and testified, federal agents arrested him for contempt of court. Capone posted bond and was released, only to be arrested in Philadelphia that May on charges of carrying a concealed weapon. Capone served 9 months in prison and was released for good behavior. In February 1931, a federal court found Capone guilty on the contempted charges and sentenced him to 6 months in Cook County Jail. Meanwhile, the U.S. Treasury Department had launched an investigation of Capone for income tax evasion. Through diligent forensic accounting, Special Agent Frank Wilson and other members of the intelligence unit of the IRS were able to put together a case, and in June 1931, Capone was indicted for evasion of federal income tax. Convicted that October after an internationally publicized trial, Capone was sentenced to 11 years in prison, first in Atlanta and later at Alcatraz, the island off of San Francisco. He was released in 1939 and died an invalid recluse at his Florida home in 1947. According to the National Retail Foundation, Americans spent nearly $26 billion on Valentine's Day gifts in 2023. People are also expected to spend an average of approximately $193 for Valentine's Day. According to Hallmark, a whopping 145 million Valentine's Day cards are exchanged every February 14th, and that's not even including all those kids' Valentines exchanged in the classroom. This makes Valentine's Day the second biggest holiday for exchanging greeting cards after Christmas. And how sweet, teachers receive the most Valentine's Day cards annually, followed by children, mothers, and wives. Needless to say, we've come a long way from 1913, which was when Hallmark cards produced their first Valentine's Day card. Around 27.6 million American households gave Valentine's Day presents to their pet dogs in 2020, and more than 17.1 million picked up gifts for their cats. All in all, American households spent an estimated $751.3 million on gifts for their pets on Valentine's Day. The first heart-shaped box of chocolates was introduced in 1861. It was created by Richard Cadbury, son of Cadbury founder John Cadbury, who started packaging chocolates in fancy boxes to increase sales. He introduced the first heart-shaped box of chocolates for V-Day in 1861, and today more than 36 million heart-shaped boxes of chocolates are sold each year. That's 58 million pounds of chocolate. It was Oliver's brother, Daniel Chase, who started printing sentimental messages on the Nico Sweethearts, though these candies were bigger than the version we have today and featured much longer printed sayings and phrases. Some of the first messages Married in white, you have chosen right, and how long shall I have to wait? Please be considerate. More than 8 billion conversation hearts are manufactured each year. At Nico has to make them all year. Each box has approximately 45 sayings, including true love, hug me, and you rock. But you can personalize your own too. But don't worry, if you still have last year's box, they have a shelf life of 5 years. William Shakespeare inspired a tradition. Writing letters to Juliet has become a Valentine's Day tradition for many, and even inspired the 2010 film Letters to Juliet. Around Valentine's Day, thousands of letters are sent to Verona, Italy, addressed to the Romeo and Juliet character Juliet Capulet. These love letters to Juliet are filled with emotions, passions, and in many cases, heartbreak. Volunteers called Juliet secretaries read through each letter, write responses, and pick a winner of the Cara Giulietta, which translates to Dear Juliet in English, prize. The winner gets to visit Juliet's home in Verona and attend a special ceremony. That is it for this episode. Thank you, Jennifer O'Neill, for being awesome and saving horses and veterans of depression and just all the things you heard tonight, for being you and for forgiving yourself for making, I guess, the worst mistake of your life and being forgiven by Jesus. This is goodbye for now. I'm your host, Steve Abramowitz, editor-in-chief of HeartlandJournal.com. See you all next time. Peace in our time, and definitely glory to God.
Nashville Subaru.
This month's hero is a Nashville nonprofit focused on helping active military veterans, first responders, and others with mental health challenges.
Yes, as Sylvia Castaneda shows us, the woman behind this equine-assisted therapy program is a Hollywood cover girl you may just recognize.
Hey, handsome. Handsome.
Major Wesley Inso of Fort Campbell is at nonprofit Hope and Healing at Hillenglade in Nashville. He's part of the Soldier Recovery Unit at the Post, participating in quarterly sessions of equine-assisted therapy to help with conditions ranging from post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, to depression.
I was amazed with the things that I learned. First is communication. I never thought that many of the things that you learn can translate to human relations. It also helped me relax, actually. It's very relaxing working with horses, and it definitely helped my anxiety and depression.
There's a lot of research about equine-assisted learning, equine-assisted therapy that really helps with mental health.
I think I came out of my mom's womb loving horses, and showed them, bred them for 40 years.
Hope and Healing at Hillenglade was founded in 2010 by famed model, actress, and author Jennifer O'Neill, who has starred in movies with legends like John Wayne, has graced the cover of fashion magazines, to being the face of CoverGirl Cosmetics for more than 30 years. The 75-year-old shift from Hollywood to Hillenglade came to her because of the love for someone special.
They called him the ace.
What came to mind was my dad, who was an absolute hero in World War II. Flew a B-17, shot down on his second to last mission, was in prison camp.
She saw the need to help soldiers heal, so developed the equine-assisted therapy curriculum, which she, staff, and volunteers now offer for free.
Military, we've served over 4,000 first responders and military and their families. There's a huge trickle-down effect of PTSD or being stressed from war. The whole family goes through the experience. He's licking his lips, he's looking at you.
Yeah.
Great job.
Yeah, thanks.
Great job. We don't ride during this. This is all from the ground. A horse has 17 expressions in his face alone. And so a lot of times when people are in transition or struggling with certain things, they don't know how they present themselves. But the horse is like a mirror, and they'll tell you how you're presenting yourselves. And it develops your relational skills that you can take to work, at home. It changes your life.
She's even incorporated art, asking participants to paint something that represents a care or blessing on, of all things, a donkey.
That came from an American Indian tradition where the warriors would paint either a victory or a loss on their ponies.
I painted 3 hearts. That represents my 3 kids.
Participants then wash the care or blessing away.
It's very symbolic. It's like give it to God.
Major Enzo's wife, Grace, is excited to see how her husband is healing.
He is happier. He sings more, so and he smiles more. I think that's more important.
Major Enzo's therapist, Laura Williams, also sees a change in soldiers.
It just really helps bring anxiety down when you start building that trust with the animal.
Jennifer is able to offer the program for free because Hill & Glade is also an event space hosting things like corporate retreats to weddings, as there's a chapel on site plus suites to stay in. There's even a recording studio, another revenue source. So those who find their hope again from the free equine-assisted therapy are grateful.
I would like to thank this organization. It is a great organization. I wish that I can continue forever because it's definitely very therapeutic.
She's my hero. Their program is awesome. I mean, I'm just such an advocate for the equine therapy and what that brings to people.
It's a mission Jennifer plans to continue to grow.
I love them. I love the horses, and I love people that sacrifice so much for our freedoms.
So we honor hope and healing at Hill & Glade as our News 2 gives back hometown hero for the month of July, presented by Nashville Subaru for its equine-assisted therapy.
Hey! Hey! How about waking up?
How did she get here?
Why don't you ask her?
Hey, you. How'd you get here?
What? Oh, when you were asleep, it was cold.
Well, why me? Why didn't you pick on him?
Well, he's young, and I thought that, well, you're older. You're comfortable.
Comfortable?
Well, that's all I
Been
could
called
think
a
of.
lot of things, but comfortable. I'll say this. You're a lot better than a hot brick to keep a man warm.
Nice to be appreciated.
I've been dreaming of the wild, wild plains, walking where the pine trees dance.
Heartland Journal Podcast is the media property of heartlandjournal.com, where you can find news stories, commentary, and content serving the heartland of America. Any views or opinions represented on the podcast are personal and belong solely to the creator and do not represent those of the people, institutions, or organizations that the creator may or may not be associated with in professional or personal capacity unless explicitly stated.